Did you know that there are scenes in the Severance trailer that we haven't seen on the show yet? Which means that those scenes are going to be showing up in the season finale. So in this video, we're going to break down the trailer for the last episode of Severance to try to understand who the man in the cure mask is and why is Mr. Drumming attacking Mark instead of doing what Mr. Milchek told him to do.
Devour feculence.
With that being said, let's look at the trailer and break it all down.
Mark, there'll be no honeymoon ending for you.
Why is Miss Cobell telling Mark he won't get a fairy tale ending? I think this is a continuation of her conversation about Cold Harbor from episode 9 of this season. If you remember, she told Mark that had he finished the file, aka Cold Harbor, that Gemma would already be dead. Before we try and break down what she means by that, I want to point out that all the files that the refiners have been working on between season 1 and 2 have the same names as all the rooms that Gemma has been taken to every day. Which I think means that each file is a specific test for Gemma to test the limits of the Severance procedure. And the ultimate test to make Severance permanent is Cold Harbor. So what I think Miss Cobell means by telling Mark that if Cold Harbor is completed, Gemma will die, I don't think it's a physical death. I think it's a mental death. But instead of killing her like they did with Irving in episode 4, or Dylan, who I think self-transitioned, so technically he wasn't killed, meaning we know that Lumen has the ability to kill your innie, but they don't have the ability to erase your outie yet. But what if that is exactly what Cold Harbor wants to do? Erase your outie so they can replace you with your innie. Think about it for a second. Notice how every time Gemma left one of those rooms, Dr. Mauer or Cicely would ask her if she remembered anything or if she felt any lingering feelings. They are trying to see if the Severance barriers are holding. Even without reintegration, we know that sometimes Severance doesn't hold. A prime example of this is Irving. Remember throughout the first season, the memories of his innie kept spilling out in the form of the black ink? We know that Audi Irving kept painting the same export hallway over and over and over again, so much so that it became ingrained in his mind and it started to spill over into his innie's mind, meaning that Severance, even though it works, is not perfect. That's why Cold Harbor needs Mark and Gemma. If they can erase Gemma's Audi and it can never bleed back into her innie's memories, they would have effectively killed Gemma as we knew her. Well, as Mark knows her, since we don't actually know Gemma, it's crazy that it's been 2 seasons and we still don't know much about who Gemma is as a person for real.
They give us half a life and think we won't fight for it.
Who do you think Helly R was talking to when she said this? Also, don't forget to click that subscribe button if you like this video as we break down who Helly R was talking to. I think she's talking to her father, James Egan, because in episode 9, it ended with James Egan coming to the MDR floor to talk to Helly R. Why I think this quote is so important, it's because of how James Egan got there. He didn't get to the 7th floor the normal way that everyone else gets to it. No, he didn't take the regular elevator. He came through the export hall, which to me means that there is another way to get into Lumen's export hall besides the doorway that Irving kept drawing. I think there might be a deeper connection between Helly R and James Egan. I know that's her dad, but what I mean is that any Helly may have a different connection with Jamie. If we go back to the season 1 finale, there was a point in that episode where James and Helly R were having a conversation, where James was being kind to Helly R. Now, if we take that and contrast it with how he's been treating Helena this entire season 2, calling her a fetid moppet, which is still kind of weird, but it's Lumen, they say weird stuff like that.
Devour feculence.
Or when he just watched her eat her breakfast and still criticized her. The only real conversation we've ever seen James Egan have has been with Helly R, aka the innie. He even goes as far as to approach her last episode to talk to her about how she had fooled him. I think that's a reference to the season 1 finale when he opened up to her. Now that I think about it, for James Egan being a pretty important character in the show Severance, we actually don't know anything about him for real. Like, what does he want? Does he secretly want to create a legacy as big as Kira Egan's, which is why he stole Miss Cobell's credit for creating Severance? And is that why he might be the man in the cure mask that we saw in the trailer? But before we get into that, can we talk about these next scenes? Mark running into the 7th floor, Mr. Milchek removing his tie and walking out, and Drummond slamming Mark into the wall. I think these scenes might be linked, and it's not because they all take place inside the Lumen 7th floor, but because I think Mark has his conversation with Miss Cobell, and after that conversation, he is going to try to sneak into the export hall via the 7th floor to find Gemma. If we pay attention to Mark's face, you can kind of see on his face that he's not super familiar with the floor layout of the severed floor once he runs out of the elevator. That's because while his mind may have been reintegrated, it's still his Audi that's in charge, and he isn't too familiar with the floor as his innie, and I think that's where Mr. Milchick and Drummond come in. Doesn't it look like Mr. Milchick is just quitting Lumen? He took off his tie and it looks like he's walking away. Milchick has had enough of Lumen. Back in episode 9 of Severance, he finally stood up to Drummond, letting him know that he needs to go out and devour feculence, aka eat shit. Tie that into the conversation that he had with Mark S., it seems to me that Mr. Milchick has had enough of Lumen. Lumen already tried him with those black portraits of Kira Egan, and now they're having him go above and beyond his role while they continuously disrespect him. I think Mr. Milchick might genuinely be a nice guy, and it's just the entire Lumen infrastructure that's making him act the way he acts and making him do these bad things. I think he's a great guy. Like, he actually tried to make things better for the severed employees to the point where both Drummond and Miss Wong had to remind them that these people are not human. They treated the innies subhuman, while at least Mr. Milchick tried to treat him with some sense of dignity. Based on all that, I think that Milchick is quitting, leaving no one to stop Mark from getting to the export hall. And the last Lumen employee that went through that export hall was Gemma, and the first person to get there and stop her was Milchick. So with Milchick quitting, that leaves Drummond to deal with Mark. That's where that scene comes in. I think Drummond is trying to stop Mark from getting to the export hall. Not just that though, after slamming him against the wall, I think since Mr. Milchick had reminded Drummond last episode that it's his responsibility to deal with the Audis, I think Drummond is going to force Mark to finish Cold Harbor. Because we see in the trailer that the file is complete, which is why the man in the Kira Egan mask is here. Who do you think is the man behind the mask? Because to me, the person I think that's behind the mask is James Egan. But the more I think about it, the more I think it might be Dr. Mauer. Listen, let's think about it for a second. Dr. Mauer is the only person we know that kept switching costumes throughout the episode he was featured in, trying to blend into each room that Gemma goes into, almost like he's a master of disguise. And if you remember, during episode 9, he was the one that called Drummond in order to have him call Mark because Cold Harbor wasn't complete. So it seems to me that he has a vested interest in making sure Cold Harbor works. Maybe by erasing Gemma completely, he might get her to finally love him, but that's just my tinfoil hat theory. But to me, it's most likely James Egan trying to live up to Kira Egan's legacy, and since Cold Harbor is a momentous occasion, him putting the mask on might be him having Kira witness this momentous occasion. But that's just my thoughts on it. I'd love to hear some of your theories. What do you think is going to happen in the finale, and who's the man behind the mask? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. And guys, if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and until next time, peace.